Greetings, candidates, and welcome to the lesson. The subject is public finance and taxation. We are still on the topic administration of income tax and tax procedures. Today we move to the third subtopic, which is taxpayers representatives. And in studying the taxpayers representatives, we are going to study the appointment, liabilities, and obligations. These are two things: appointment and obligations. And in Kenya, a taxpayer can appoint a tax representative to handle their tax affairs. You as an individual or an entity can hire another person to handle your tax affairs. The person who is hired to do so is what we are referring to as taxpayers' tax responsibility. And the concept of a tax representative and their responsibilities are governed by the Tax Procedures Act. The Tax Procedures Act. So let's find out how are they appointment of tax representatives. Now, the Tax Procedures Act recognizes different scenarios where a tax representative exists or is appointed. The first scenario is voluntary appointment. Voluntary appointment. Number one is voluntary appointment. A taxpayer can voluntarily appoint a person to act on their behalf in matters relating to tax. And this is typically done through formal authorization, often facilitated through the KRA iTax system or via written letter of authority. And that allows the representative to interact with KRA. All right, that allows the representative to file returns, to make payments, and handle other tax-related tasks for the taxpayer. So the taxpayer can voluntarily appoint a tax representative to handle their tax affairs. That's the first scenario. Number two is deemed tax representative. Deemed. The first scenario is a voluntary appointment. Then we have deemed tax representative. Deemed tax representative. Now, the Tax Procedures Act designates certain individuals or entities as tax representatives by virtue of their position or relationship with the taxpayer. Examples include a guardian or a legal representative of a person under a legal disability or a minor who is entitled to receive income on their behalf. The Tax Procedures Act designates certain individuals or entities as tax representatives by virtue of their position or by virtue of their relationship with the taxpayer. A good example is a guardian. Another example is an accounting officer of entities like companies, partnerships, associations of persons, government bodies, the judiciary, Parliamentary Service Commission, and so on. A guardian is an example. Guardian of a minor, accounting officers of companies, of government departments or entities, and so on. Understand? We are highlighting tax representatives. Okay? So we've said it could be accounting officer, or it could just be an accounting officer based in Kenya for non-resident companies or foreign governments. Okay, accounting officer based in Kenya for foreign companies. That is a deemed tax representative. An accounting officer based in Kenya for non-resident companies, for foreign governments, or international organizations with activities in Kenya. Manager is also deemed tax representative, manager or a person controlling the interests of a non-resident person in Kenya. Insolvency practitioners, insolvency practitioners like administrators, receivers, and liquidators appointed to manage the affairs of a taxpayer. There could also be for non-resident persons required to register for VAT and who do not have a fixed place of business in Kenya. The law requires them to appoint a tax representative in Kenya. A tax representative in Kenya. You understand? Yes. So we have voluntary appointment could be by voluntary. The taxpayer can appoint a tax representative. Then you have deemed representatives, who are individuals or entities who act as representatives by virtue of their position or relationship with the taxpayer. We've given examples: guardian, accounting officers based in Kenya, managers, insolvency practitioners, and so on. Okay, so candidates, we are studying the taxpayers, tax representatives. We've looked at the appointment. We want to move on to the tax, the liabilities and obligations. Before that, there is what we call licensed tax agent. Licensed tax agent. There is what we call licensed agent. Licensed tax agent. Now, while related, a tax agent is a specific category of tax representative who is licensed by the commissioner under Section 20 of the Tax Procedures Act. And these are typically qualified professionals like accountants who are members of the Institute of Certified Public Accountants, or advocates holding a current practicing certificate, or even former KRA tax administrators who are deemed fit and proper to handle tax matters for multiple clients. So appointment of a licensed tax agent by a taxpayer often involves a formal engagement letter and authorization on the iTax platform. So a licensed tax agent can also be deemed to be a taxpayer's tax representative. Now let's discuss the liabilities and obligations of tax representatives. Liabilities and obligations. Liabilities and obligations. Now, tax representatives in Kenya carry significant liabilities and obligations under the Tax Procedures Act, and the core principle is that they are responsible for complying with the tax laws on behalf of the taxpayer. The first obligation or liability is performance of tax obligations. 1. Performance of tax obligations. Now, a tax representative is responsible for performing any duty or obligation imposed by a tax law on the taxpayer they represent. And that may include submitting tax returns accurately, submitting tax returns accurately. They have a responsibility to submit tax returns accurately and on time, paying taxes due. They have an obligation to pay taxes due by the taxpayer within the prescribed deadlines, maintaining proper records. They have an obligation to maintain to maintain and retain proper tax records and documents for the required period. Currently, it's 5 years. They should ensure that for the last 5 years, the one they represent has retained and maintained records. They also have an obligation to provide information requested by the commissioner. Provide information requested by the commissioner. That is an obligation. They should also comply with any other requirements under the tax law. For example, implementing e-teams, VAT registered persons for VAT registered persons, and so on. All right? That is very important. The second obligation is joint and several liability. Joint liability. Joint and several liability. This is a crucial aspect of the tax representative role, which is the potential for joint and several liability with the taxpayer for outstanding tax debts. And Section 16 of the Tax Procedures Act stipulates that where a tax representative fails to pay tax that is due by the taxpayer, the representative may become personally liable for that tax to the extent of any funds or assets of the taxpayers that are in their possession or under their control. Specifically, the Act states that the commissioner may recover and pay taxes from the tax representative. And in the case of appointed persons like insolvency practitioners, their duties include notifying the commissioner of their appointment and ensuring tax compliance during the administration of the taxpayer's affairs. So that is an obligation. They also have an obligation we are calling duty of due diligence. Duty of due diligence. Number 3, duty of due. They have a duty of due diligence and care. Tax representatives are expected to act with due diligence and care in managing the tax affairs of the taxpayer. Failure to comply with tax obligations due to negligence or willful default can lead to penalties being imposed, potentially on the representative as well, especially if it results in tax evasion or the avoidance or the taxpayer. So they have a duty of diligence and care. The tax representatives are expected to act with due diligence and care in managing the tax affairs of the taxpayer. 4, confidentiality. 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 Tax representatives are bound by confidentiality regarding the taxpayer's financial and tax information obtained in the course of their duties. Confidentiality. So that is it, candidates, for our today's lesson. where we've studied the taxpayers, tax representatives. We've highlighted the appointment and also liabilities and obligations of the tax representatives. Bye-bye.